Welcome to the Happy in the Mess podcast. We are your hosts, Marlena, Cheri, and Matthew. We are therapists and coaches, and we want to share our own stories with you, as well as the wisdom, insights, and tips we've learned along the way. Thanks for tuning in to this episode.
Thank you for joining us. Today, we're going to be talking about loneliness. And if you're paying attention, you're going to notice that we have a different format. One of us is out of the country. I'll let her tell you all about that. And we've decided to deal with the time difference, the 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 big time difference, with a different format. And in this way, you're going to get to hear from each of us individually as we talk about loneliness. Today, we're going to talk about the cost of loneliness. Then we're going to have two follow-up episodes focused on loneliness. Well, the cure of connection. So you'll get to hear us each individually. You'll also get to hear how much we regulate each other and keep each other on target with our topics because there's no one here to bounce ideas off of. So we'll see how this goes. We are talking, this is our 50th episode. So, yay, we have been at this for 2 years and have been talking to you guys about all kinds of ways to be happy in the mess. So, hopefully, today's topic will also be of interest. It is a little bit ironic that we're talking about loneliness alone. So, we'll talk a little bit about how loneliness is the same and different from being alone. As a reminder, please like, share, comment, rate, review, and subscribe on the platform you're listening to. This is really important for us as we're trying to grow and get our messages out to different people. So I'm going to talk first, and then Matthew and Marlena are going to weigh in with their own stuff. I cannot be held accountable if all of us talk about the same thing. So I bet we have different takes on loneliness. But if we don't, so sorry, you should complain about it in the comments. I just want to start with what is loneliness. We all feel loneliness at some point. It's a feeling, and the feeling itself is not good or bad. Feelings are really just a signal that something's going on. Feelings are like a flag that says, hey, pay attention. There's something here that's important. So loneliness is a feeling. It's a feeling that most of us don't enjoy, but it is a normal feeling. It's something that probably is a part of being human. Um, it is a signal that our social and relational needs are not being met. And in fact, there's probably a lot more loneliness that's going on right now. I know during the pandemic, those loneliness rates went up a lot, but even post pandemic, we're in a different sort of world. I think as we move to more virtual connections, it's they're a different kind of connection. Virtually, I might interact with someone, but it's in a much more passive and broken up way. I do find that virtually I can connect pretty well to other people, but I don't spend a lot of time in meetings with people. And there are a lot of meetings that either have too many people to feel connected, or other one or both of us will have our camera off, so you lose that eye to eye connection. Um, Also, we have replaced the kind of interactions you would have in person with texts or messages, or even just leaving something on someone's page. And those kind of connections, it's hard to feel connected that way. So there is a lot of loneliness that's masked underneath this pseudo connection. Now, you can certainly have connection through video and in a virtual world. You just have to seek it out. You have to intentionally um, see someone in a similar way that you would in real life. And you miss out on the vicarious connections with others. The things like standing in line while you're waiting to pay for something at the store, that kind of interaction You can have like that minimal interaction where you talk to each other just for a little bit and feel less alone because of it. So loneliness is different than being alone. Loneliness is the feeling, being alone is the physical state. And you can feel alone both while you can feel lonely while you're alone, but you also can feel lonely in a crowd. You can feel lonely with friends. And probably one of the harder lonelinesses is to feel lonely when you're with a partner. So let's talk about some of the triggers of loneliness. Um, there are a lot of triggers, but here are just some. Feeling left out can often leave people feeling lonely. Not feeling understood, and feeling misjudged. Now, all of these are worse in a virtual world because it's you might be with someone by texting, you might be with someone by sending messages back and forth, but it is much harder to feel that deeper um, understood and known that comes from sitting with someone and seeing them eye to eye. Another trigger for loneliness is missing a loved one, when you really can't be with someone that you really want to be with. And another trigger are transitions. Most transitions are about shaking everything up, whether it's moving to a new place, retiring, taking a new job, having a child, even getting married. All of these transitions leave you in uncharted territory, and it's hard to feel connected to other people when you're using a lot of brain power to understand how you get back into a normal habit driven life. So those are just some of the triggers. There are a lot more. Being lonely is really hard on a person. So being lonely should be a trigger that you probably need to do something. Now, sometimes maybe there's like that good loneliness where you remember how much you like other people because you have that separation. But the loneliness that I'm referring to is the loneliness that can be fairly destructive and harmful. It can be really hard on you physically. People who are connected with others live longer. So that loneliness actually can wear on you physically. Maybe it's that you don't take as good a care of yourself. Maybe it is something about the being in proximity with other people, but being lonely can wear on you physically. It also can wear on you mentally. When you spend a lot of time alone, um, we get into thought silos. That's where you have a train of thought and you repeat it so often that you believe it's true. It's almost like that thing where if someone tells a lie repeatedly, what ends up happening in our culture, this is like repeatedly over multiple people start to say, oh, yeah, I think I heard that somewhere. So then they start to believe that maybe there's some truth to it. Well, the same thing happens in your brain. It's like when you're repeating the same thing over and over again, you start to think, well, that must be it. Otherwise, I would have thought of something different. So it can really mess with your thinking to spend too much time alone, feeling lonely. Loneliness can also impact you emotionally. It can increase depression and anxiety. It also can increase other um, emotional problems with regulation. And then socially, when we feel lonely, we become more sensitive to other people's rejection, and it becomes harder to reach out to other people, even when we really need that. So, the last thing I want to talk about is how loneliness is a sign of roommate syndrome. As you guys know, I'm a specialist in relationships, especially couples relationships. And one of the most troubling type of loneliness is the loneliness that you feel in a relationship with someone else. So this is when you've been with a partner and that newness starts to wear off and you stop spending quite as much time together, and so that excitement of the relationship starts to die down. The loneliness comes when there are fewer interactions. One of the parts of roommate syndrome is when couples are in the same place but don't actually interact with each other. Um, that can cause a lot of loneliness. But also, the loneliness of sitting on the couch together but being millions of miles apart. One of the iconic images that I have of that is when one partner is watching the TV and the other partner is on their phone, and they're really watching different things and they're really not interacting with each other. So there's a real deep loneliness that comes with that kind of disconnection. Um, Another part of that loneliness of roommate syndrome is feeling like your partner really doesn't know you, doesn't get you, doesn't understand you. And that kind of loneliness can really put a gulf between a couple. Now, why does this happen? We miss out on so many opportunities to connect with our partner. Um, we're very distracted and busy, and sometimes we'll do this missing each other. My husband and I are really prone to this and have to be intentional to keep it from happening. And that is, so one of us will be busy in the house and the other one will come in, and we won't want to interrupt what the other person is doing. So we'll kind of wait, but if the other person doesn't stop what they're doing, we'll go get busy doing something. So then when the first partner is, they have a break, or they're they stop what they're doing. They then come and find the other person, but now they're busy doing something. They wait a little bit, check in. Okay, you're not going to stop. So then they go and find something else to do. And this can happen all night if we're not intentional about spending time together. And if that continued night after night, we would start to feel like we were just roommates who lived in the same place. And that is a very deep kind of loneliness. So, what's the solution to all of this? I've hinted at this all along. It's connection. That's what we're going to talk about in the next two episodes. So, make sure to tune in for those. I am curious what Marlena and Matthew have to say about this. So, you're going to get to find out right now, and I'm going to have to wait until this episode posts. So, as a reminder, please like, share, comment, rate, review, subscribe, share this with your friends, get every member of your family to subscribe or sign up for notifications so that we can get our numbers up there. We are slowly growing, but we need your help in getting the message out about how wonderful our episodes are. Thanks for joining us today.
Loneliness, according to the U.S. Surgeon General, is an epidemic in the United States, and it contributes to negative effects on mental health, heart disease, stroke, and dementia. So what exactly is loneliness? I describe it as a lack of sense of connection to yourself, to others, and even to something greater. And the U.S. Surgeon General in his podcast episode with Brene Brown also says you can feel lonely on 3 different levels. So you may have a fantastic partnership, an intimate one, but still feel lonely on the level of friendship and even community. So those 3 levels are having like one person to confide in, like think of like the term soulmate, that kind of thing, or just an intimate person with whom you really share an intimate connection. Then you have the friends in the social circle. And then you have people with whom you share maybe a common interest or goal, or like your work friends, this community where you share a purpose. And you can have 2 of the 3 and still feel lonely, or you can have none of them and feel extremely lonely. And so while it's normal to feel lonely from time to time or not have necessarily all of these areas hit all the time, chronic states of loneliness can feed on itself. And that makes you more isolated, and you're more likely to not want to put yourself out there the more lonely you are. So it's kind of a self-feeding cycle. So I think the danger here is when you start making meaning of your loneliness, make it about you and think there's something wrong with you because you're lonely, or people don't want to hang out with you. And that kind of negative self-talk can really feed on itself. And I think that's really the danger of loneliness, is that it can be just a cycle you get stuck in. And I think too that loneliness really is a systemic issue. Like if it's an epidemic in the United States, that means it's probably not your fault. However, I mean, we are responsible in trying to change it. But if you think about our structures, like the church, as we know it, is kind of dying in a lot of ways. Like, so those that used to be a place where people would gather and get together and find friendship and community, but we don't have that anymore. We also don't have a typical agricultural society where people would come together for the harvest or for planting and help each other out. Like needing your neighbors is like a thing of the past. We have DoorDash. We have Facebook to keep up with our friends. We have all of these like online communities that really don't foster a true sense of connection. I think those things actually make us more isolated. And if you weren't lucky enough to go to a school, university, for example, is a great place to meet friends organically and keep them for perhaps a lifetime. But if you weren't one of those who went, it's harder and harder as adults to make friends and to even get romantic partners, because now we have online dating, which is great in theory. But given the presence of so many options, sometimes you don't make an option, you don't make a choice, or there's this illusion that like there's someone better always around the corner. And so we don't commit to anything. So I think loneliness is perpetuated by the systems in place that we have. And like Facebook and Instagram and these other social media platforms, again, great in theory, but what happens is that you can just cyberstalk and keep up to date on someone's life without actually having to pick up the phone and make a call or make a coffee date to actually learn about their life. So I feel like our connections are more superficial, not authentic, and that is part of the reason why we're seeing loneliness grow and the problems associated, the physical and mental health problems associated with loneliness. Perhaps when we needed each other more, it was easier to break out of loneliness and not have that experience. But I'd like for you to consider that needing someone is necessary for your own mental and physical health, and that it's good to ask for help. I think that's a sign of strength. So anyway, in our next episodes, we'll be talking about how to overcome loneliness and what to do about it. But in the meantime, if you identify, please hit the like, share, subscribe. Think about maybe the ways that you might be perpetuating loneliness in your life, whether it's negative self-talk or being part of the systems that prevent you from interacting with others. So anyway, see you next time.
All by myself. Just kidding. Hey, y'all. This is my segment of our session on loneliness. As I'm sure you found, we're deviating from our normal formatting, just to not just to mix things up, but just because we had some things that happened between the three and we can't all meet at the same time. So it's absolutely fabulous because it gives us a chance to kind of explore. And in my segment, it lets me kind of grab the people that I really enjoy working with, and lets me speak directly to you. So for this one, I'm really going to kind of talk about loneliness in the sense of how it applies to men. So if you are a man, or you know a man, or you want to be a man, or there's a dragon that's going to make a man out of you, then this is probably a good segment to pay attention to. As well as for my just neurodivergent folks that I work with, I think there's a big component of this in there that I want to make sure I address too. It was very important to me to do that. So, so the cost of loneliness is what we're all talking about. And there is a gender difference in there. I was looking up some statistics on that, and men, of course, they are more likely to statistically, they're more likely to experience loneliness, but they're also less likely to do anything about it. So those two things are probably correlated in there with the underreporting. A lot of cultures and a lot of generations also have this idea that men should be stoic, self-reliant. So pursuing friendships is kind of an antithesis to that. And of course, that does apply mostly to all those old people out there, those, 45 and, oh wait, I am one of those. Don't throw anything at me. No, the 45 and up crowd, we are more likely to experience that as well. We often have reduced social networks, few close friendships. And this has a profound effect on our body because it also drives up depression. It drives up rates of anxiety. Self-medication. If there's nothing to balance off of, anything really sounds good. So we see a lot of alcohol or substance abuse to combat the loneliness. We may see getting lost in virtual worlds of some sort as well. Which of course, all of that also impacts our physical health. So actually men who've reported about being lonely actually have a higher risk of developing conditions like heart disease. They have high blood pressure. Um, and so it gets to be really complicated. And it's dangerous. It's something that we absolutely need to address and make sure that we are talking about. It has a huge cost. Um, and really the best way to do that is take stock of life, of what's going on. I think we tend to often push ourselves into one main direction. We throw ourselves into work. We throw ourselves into, sometimes play or fun, it might be, family. And again, nothing wrong with any of those, but it tends to narrow our focus a lot, and it doesn't give us options for going out, for talking to people, for meeting people. Um, I would say it's a lot like gaming, where you might have your main method of doing things, but you also have to have times that you're outside of your comfort zone. And this is hard, by the way, because as a raging introvert, I had to laugh during the pandemic. Um, it was honestly probably about November before I really experienced my first bout of, wow, I'm feeling kind of lonely. Now, granted, part of it I had family at home, but family does not always equate to friendships, especially if you have a responsibility to to the family, if you have that sense of responsibility. It's nice to have people that you don't don't have to have that relationship with, and I didn't, quite frankly. And it was about November before I was like, wow, I could really use somebody around to talk to, sometimes just to play games with, whatever it is. Um, and I do think with men in particular, we have more of a thought of we tend to be more doers together than beers together, and that's okay. It's what it is. I have had some of my best conversations sitting next to somebody playing Smash Brothers or Perfect Dark or GoldenEye, because I'm that generation. Um, Mario Kart, not so much. That tends to destroy friendships, so we try to avoid that one. But we like to do things together, and having that group of people that you can do stuff together, but also take that time to check in and see how everybody is being. Often we don't have those check-ins. Sometimes we'll just exist with one another, but we never stop and say, "Hey, how are you? What are you struggling with? Is there anything I can listen to you about or talk to you?" And in the case of faith-based people, a lot of times we'll frame that in terms of prayer requests, but we also need to maybe have some of that vulnerability and that openness that's there. So, again, we'll talk more about the antidotes for that, but I think remembering that it does have a cost, and sometimes just taking stock and see what that actually means for us. Um, in similar vein, but at the same time a little bit more open, my neurodivergent peeps. So my ADHDers, my highly sensitive people, my tribe out there that I love, all of you, certainly people who are on the autism spectrum disorder. Um, yeah, that always fits wrong. It's not a disorder. It's a different way of functioning. Um, the neurodiverse nexus is an important angle as we talk about loneliness. Neurodiversity is this beautiful tapestry of different minds. We should celebrate it, but often we tend to experience loneliness in a very unique way. Sometimes social interactions are a bit like speaking different languages. Um, Most of my neurodivergent peeps, like we are well versed in meme culture, and we speak, think, read, text, communicate in memes because they communicate so much more the depth of what we want to do. Um, And sometimes it's a complete different way. Um, the Star Trek episode with Picard and one of his enemies, where the enemy does not speak a core language. They speak a representative language, and they have to learn to work and connect with each other. I think a lot of times it's the way neurodivergent peeps are. I heard somebody once say it's kind of like trying to explain the plot of a sci-fi movie to your grandmother. It can happen. It just takes a lot of time, patience, and just recognizing the challenge. But also realize that whether you're on the autism spectrum, have ADHD or other neurodivergent traits, you're not alone. Your experiences are not just you, because there are other people who understand that. There's communities, there's support networks out there ready to embrace you for who you are. And it really comes down to the core thing of recognizing that you being different is what makes this world a wonderful place. Often we can isolate, and this is particularly true for transition periods. So I have found a lot of times as the neurodivergent peeps, as we are transitioning from teenagerhood into adulthood, and we have these responsibilities, and friendships aren't as natural as it might be when you're in school, when you have people close to you. That's the time that this tends to really start to come into play. We lose those connections. We're also dealing with different personalities, and sometimes knowing like when we need a break, when we need to back down, and how to communicate that with people. One of the most beautiful stories I heard recently, and I apologize because I'm going to spit this one off the cuff, and I can't attribute it to the right source. But they referred to their 10 o'clock bedtime as pumpkin, turning into a pumpkin. And her friends, she didn't want to go out because like this idea that she had a hard stop and she didn't want to offend people. And as she worked with her friends and they recognized it, they're like, no, that's your pumpkin time. Like when you need to go, you go. You don't need to explain. You don't need to change anything. Just communicate it. And we really need people who are like that. And it takes time and effort and failed relationships to try to find those core connections. But again, it's so important. Our social connection, that's where we find our sense of safety. That's where we find out who we are, how to connect to other people. All of those things are important. And that's developed in the midst of those relationships. And it doesn't happen in loneliness. Loneliness, you get a big echo chamber for your brain. So, so there you have it. Those are my two really big angles on this loneliness, and the cost of it. Now, if you are going through this, I always like to give a little bit of hope, but please keep in mind, we split this into 3 episodes. So we've got 2 more where we're going to talk about either embracing the loneliness or how to change it. So if you are feeling alone, try to be okay. Try to accept that as a part and as a temporary state. And this idea that maybe we can change it, we can work together. Because really your life, your health, and certainly your mental health depend on it. So if you have it, whether you're a man, whether you're a neurodivergent soul, whether you're an introvert, just remember that you are not alone. If you can find them, reach out, find your tribe, embrace this mess of life, because sometimes it's in the mess that we find the most beautiful connections. Until next time, take care.